Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a ridiculous neighbor slapped me after I got her car towed from my front lawn. She claims that she owns this part of my property. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. The title story starts like this. For some background, 2 months ago I moved houses. The neighborhood is lovely, not very uniform, which I preferred to those cult-like streets where the houses look like clones of each other. Anyways, something else that differs is the size of the lawns. Me and my neighbor's lawns both connect in the center, but it's clear that my portion is much larger as it extends further in front of my house. This was also reflected in the price difference. I noticed straight away that my neighbor parked her cars on her lawn, no problem with me, but about a week later her cars slowly started inching closer to my lawn. At first I had no problem, they were clearly over my side, but only by about half a meter. I chalked it down to her, just assuming that I would not be so strict about it, which I wasn't planning to be, as really it did not bother me. I'd like to note that although the two lawns connect, it's clear where they separate, as there's a fence between the two houses, not between the lawns though. That gives an indication where the separation would be if said fence were to carry on down to the grass, if that makes any sense. Another week later and there was nearly a whole vehicle on my side of the lawn, which I did start having a bit of an issue with, as I did have plans for my lawn. And well, it's my lawn. So then I left a polite note on her windshield, just informing her that she was breaching the confines of her lawn. When I returned home from work that day, all hell broke out. "What's the meaning of this?" my neighbor screamed in my face. I saw my note in her hand. "Oh yes, that. Well, I was leaving early, so I didn't want to wake you up. Instead I wrote a note. Your car was on my lawn, no biggie, just wanted to let you know so you can move it." "I will not be moving it," she shouted back. "Sorry?" I was flabbergasted. "You should be sorry. I ran out of room on my driveway for my cars, so had to use my lawn. But now I want my lawn to look pretty and my cars destroy the grass, so I need to use that space." "I'm sorry, but you cannot use my lawn for your cars." "And why the heck not?" "Because it is not your property." "This whole damn street might as well be my property," she continued screaming, gesturing around with her hands. "Do you have any idea how long I had lived here?" "Not a clue." Although I was informed people moved in and out of the house I'm currently in at an alarming rate, I'm beginning to see why. Karen screamed, 15 years. How do you think it feels when you've lived somewhere for that long, only for some little nobody to come waltzing in and start making demands after only a few weeks? Demands? Yes, demands. That is what this is. She waved the paper in front of my face. "Ma'am, I'm just..." "Don't call me ma'am." "Okay, sorry. I was just trying to let you know that I don't want you parking on my property." "You don't own that land. It makes no difference how long you've lived here. If you didn't buy it, it's not yours." "I cannot believe this. The cheek. This is my property." "Come over here," I said and walked over to the fence. This fence here indicates where the lawns part. Walk down in a straight line from this fence and you will see where our lawns should be separating. "I will do no such thing. This fence is just here to show how our houses are separate." Pretty sure that's clear by the fact that they are two separate buildings. "Don't be so rude with me. I've lived here much longer than you." "Well, Karen, as we have already established, that doesn't matter, and frankly, I could care less." "Fine then, I will move my car," she suddenly said, tune completely switched up. "Thank you," I said with a sigh as she stormed away, trampling over some flowers I had planted as she did so. The following day, when I returned home from work, a large SUV was parked on my lawn, this time fully over onto my side. I groaned internally, realizing this was gonna become a thing. I decided not to go and confront her after how she acted last time, and I just called the non-emergency police line. They advised that I call a tow truck company, as it is clearly trespassing, and passed me a number of one that they recommend. So that is what I did, and 10 minutes later, a tow truck was outside and clamping up her car. I came outside right at the same time my neighbor did. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" she screamed at the man hooking up her car. "Towing away this truck that is parked on your neighbor's lawn." "No, you don't understand. That's my truck." "Oh, well then, I'm towing your truck that you have parked on your neighbor's lawn." "You cannot do that. I own this lawn." "You do?" he asked, to which I shook my head and I walked over with the papers, confirming which part is my lawn. He carried on hooking up the car. At this time, the woman stormed over to me with an angry look plastered across her face. "You! How could you do this? We are neighbors." "Well, you have not been very neighborly." "You know how long I've lived here? Do you have no respect?" "Not for you, no." Her face reddened and she said, "You cannot do this. Do you know how much money it will cost me to get this car out of the lot? And more to the point that he's not being very careful with the paintwork. You'll be paying for any damages, hope you know that." She got closer with each sentence, causing me to lean back slightly. I saw out of the corner of my eye as the man hooking up her car started filming us on the phone. "Listen, you parked on my property even after I asked you not to. You have no right to do so and would not listen to me, so I had to get you towed. And I will continue to get you towed if you do this again." "Are you threatening me?" she asked with a big gasp. "No, I'm telling you what the very legal consequences will be of your actions." "I cannot believe it. You have no respect. I own this street. Bloody hell." "No, you don't." A fleeting look passed over her eyes and the next thing I knew, I had been slapped hard across the face. The sound reverberated around the lawn before she turned and stormed over to the man. He had finished hooking up her car and jumped into the driver's seat, locking the door as she pounded on the window. But he did not drive away and it took me a minute to realize why. He was calling the police instead. When they arrived, the woman suddenly went into innocent mode and started ranting about how horrible I had been and that I had no respect for her and that I was on her property. "Sir, that's not true. Here." I handed them the documents outlining what property belongs to who. "Ma'am, this is not your lawn." "Don't call me that," she yelled. The driver of the tow truck walked over, showing the police the footage of the woman slapping me, something I had completely forgotten about. Hearing the audio, my neighbor's face paled and she began stammering to find her way out of the situation. "You're gonna have to come with us down to the station," one of the officers stated as he began cuffing her wrists. She screamed out as she was dragged over to the car. They informed that I could follow them to the station to have a statement taken and press charges, which is what I intended to do. Whilst at the precinct, the woman saw me again and threatened to have me arrested for trespassing, which was laughable. Of course, I pressed charges on this insane Karen. As they checked into her background, they saw that she already had an outstanding warrant for assaulting the previous neighbor, and this was only last month. She ended up being charged with 2 counts of misdemeanor assault, both for the last time and this situation, and she was found guilty, receiving 90 days in county jail. I also pushed forward to get a restraining order, which will force her to move houses when she gets out. I thanked the tow truck driver during the proceedings. If it wasn't for his quick thinking to film, I don't think I would have gotten such an easy win. Her house has already been listed, the only thing she will really need to do is get her stuff and go. I just hope my next neighbors are much more palatable than her. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you still enjoy these stories about crazy neighbors, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment, because that would help me tremendously. Without wasting any more time, let's dive right into the next story, which is titled Non-Profit Neighbor Part 1, posted by user Capital Hoovercraft on r/Ripe Stories. So some background information: I live in the southeastern part of the USA in a one-stoplight tourist trap of a town that is surrounded on one side by a national park. In the last year, I lost 2 of the most important people in my life, my mother and great-grandfather, within 3 months of each other. Due to that loss, I inherited my great-grandfather's estate. That is sadly where the problem began. Because of the national park being a non-profit organization, began a Get Back to Nature program on land that was gifted to them by local families that is about 10 miles from our small town. And well, it's actually a great program that has provided great field trips for our local elementary school. However, the main problem began when they decided they wanted to expand and create a larger off-site campus within our small town. The corporation was again gifted with land adding up to nearly 200 acres right across the road from my home. I would not have had a single problem with that happening if the future problems had not occurred. So it's their property, they can do what they like with it as long as it does not negatively impact my life. It all started when I was about to leave my house in the morning for work. So as I am leaving, I come across a man standing halfway down my driveway, taking pictures of my home and the surrounding property. He was a rather short and out of shape man who barely came to my shoulders, with a red face and dark thinning hair. When I approached and asked if I could help him, he asked if I lived in this home, and I replied in that yes, I did. Before I could continue to ask why he was on my property, he talked over me and asked to speak with the owner because he has decided that he was gonna purchase my land. I told him that he was speaking to the owner and I was not planning on selling my family home. He got angry and said that skinny piss ants like me could not be the owner, and he wanted to speak to the owner as he called my great-grandfather names out. I'm not one quick to anger, but my great-grandfather had only been dead for 2 months and I'm horribly prone to sarcasm as a defense mechanism. Thus I replied that you are welcome to go talk to him, but that he would need a mystic to conduct a seance, as I pointed over the hill at the local church graveyard. He did not like my cheek as his face got even redder, almost turning purple, as he decided to cuss me up one side and down the other before trying to grab my collar as he reared his other fist back to hit me. As soon as he reached for me, I took several steps back and asked him to leave my property, which I realized I should have done from the start. The man ignored me and tried to take a couple more steps towards me. This time I did not ask him to leave. I flashed my concealed carry at him and told him that he was to leave my property. This seemed to surprise the man for some reason. He didn't think about the fact that this is the South and guns grow on trees around here. He finally stepped back and started to leave. As he left, he yelled that this would not be the last that I saw of him and that he would be back and he would bring more trouble to me. And sadly, he was right. Not even 2 days later, at about 2 AM, I am awoken by a great thud on my door. I rush out of my bed, grab my gun, worried that one of the large trees had fallen and hit my house or something. I swing my door open to see the back of a rather short man in a black hooded sweatshirt trying to run up my hill. By the time I got there, he was almost to my mailbox. I could have easily caught up to him, but I'm smarter than I look. I did not know if he had more people with him or if he also had a gun, and not willing to risk the chance, I stayed at my home and called the police. As I was on the phone with the police, I looked at the bottom half of my door and noticed a shoe print about 6 inches below the door handle. It takes the police about 15 minutes to arrive and the man is gone by then. Over the next couple weeks, every other night I hear someone knock on my door or try to force it open. Once I even caught a man standing on my back porch peering through my windows. Update: welcome to part 2 of this annoying epic tale. Again, I will warn that this is a very long story that's been going on for nearly 2 years now. Several days after my nighttime visitors appeared, I get a letter in the mail asking all homeowners of my street to meet at the local courthouse for a meeting with the so-called non-profit. I show up for this meeting and listen to them explain how they are planning to build their off-site campus, and it raised several concerns for me. The first is that they claim to want to widen the road so that they would be able to put in their driveway. The second, they asked to cooperate with homeowners to want to cut down some trees on our properties so that they were legally allowed to put in their driveway. In our county, to put in a commercial driveway, they needed a clear line of sight up to 150 feet going in each direction of the road. Third, they did not mention once what they would do about the water runoff that would come down their driveway and flood the entire back half of my property. And well, over the last 25 years, I've nearly lost a quarter acre due to erosion due to this runoff already. By developing the road without countermeasures to reduce the runoff, I was worried that the current problem would worsen. As I was about to raise my concerns, the door to the conference room opened and in strode the short, overweight man who wanted to buy my property. The people running the meeting then introduced the man as the main person in charge of this project. I was already against several points that were brought up, but this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Now that he had arrived, they started the Q&A portion of the meeting. I immediately stood up and raised my concerns, and soon several of my neighbors followed suit. They only responded with half assurances and talked in circles. When I returned home, I immediately posted "Do Not Trespass" signs all the way around my property and put up several more cameras, since now I had a name to put to the face that had been bothering me for nearly a month. He or one of his subordinates must have seen me placing the cameras, because I no longer had any nighttime trespassers. It seemed like the troubles had stopped because I went almost 2 months without being bothered by these people. Until I woke up to go work one morning to the sound of a chainsaw. As I was leaving the house, I see them cutting trees on their property to clear their field of view, but then I noticed large orange X's painted on my entire tree line that circles my property by the road. For those who are not aware, the orange X's indicate trees marked to be chopped down. This immediately had me enraged, so I crossed the road, stopping just before their property line, and yelled for their foreman to come speak to me. The foreman walked over and asked what seemed to be the problem, and I just pointed out behind me at the more than a dozen orange X's painted on my trees and asked him who gave him permission to mark these trees. He told me it was the short man, and he claimed that he had already gotten permission from the owner to actually clear the line. I told him he does not have permission to cut the trees. I asked for the foreman's name and the name of the company. I then told the foreman if I come home from work and a single tree is missing, I would be coming after him, his company and the short man for trespassing and destruction of property. I then left and went to work, and I told my boss the whole story and that I did not feel comfortable knowing that they were still there cutting trees and no one was at my home to stop them if they tried to cut mine. Thankfully, my boss is a very good person and allowed me to go home at lunch and stay home until the people had finished their job and left. I came home and none of the trees were cut down, thankfully. It was a nice day, so I grabbed a camping chair and a book I was currently reading and sat in the shade of one of my trees and just relaxed. At around 4 p.m, I'm aroused from my book by a familiar voice screaming. I look over and see the short man screaming at the foreman. Thankfully, I did not even have to move from my spot to hear them. The short man was screaming so loud I could have heard him from my workplace. He screamed at the foreman, wanting to know why the marked trees on my property had not been cut yet. The foreman, not to be outdone, screamed back the little man that they did not have permission to cut those trees. The short man yelled that he gave them permission that morning. The foreman yelled back that the owner denied that access before leaving for work. The short man looked over at my home and saw me sitting under my shade tree, and I just waved at him. Apparently, I poked the bull here because he charged his way over to my property, and as he was about to cross over, I just pointed to one of my no trespass signs and smiled. The short man stopped and decided to scream at me from them, asking who gave me the right and authority to tell his men that they could not cut those trees. I just smiled and said, as the homeowner, I have all the authority I needed. The man's face turned that almost purple color again as he screamed and stormed away. All I could think of was the episode from South Park where Cartman kept saying to respect my authority, and I started laughing. Update number 2, welcome again to part 3 of this annoying epic tale. So with the tree debacle settled, my nighttime visitors returned. None came within vision of the cameras I had placed, and they decided to sneak around the barn I have on the back quarter of my property. I would catch sight of them standing there and watching the house. I noticed that things started going missing from the barn, such as tools and parts for my great-grandfather's old truck that I'd been restoring in my free time. I had called the police each time I caught sight of them, and I think they were just getting as annoyed by it as I was. Soon the police just decided to establish a patrol route that went by my house every night at different times. I think it was just so I would stop calling the dispatcher had my number memorized by that point. The nighttime visitors went on for about 3 months, and I guess the short man decided to use a different tactic. I started receiving letters and phone calls from real estate agents. Nearly 15 letters and probably in excess of 20 calls a day asking to buy my home. I started a little game out of it. Every time I got a call or a letter, I increased the sales price in my head. I'm now sitting at a cool 40 million for just over 5 acres of land. I should mention that as of all of this has been going on, I'm also renovating the home for the first time since it was built in 1979. So to be petty, I created a pile of all the materials and hoarded trash such as 30-year-old linens and broken furniture that my great-grandfather had kept over the years. This pile is now more than 10 feet tall and close to 10 feet in diameter. I plan to send all of it to the dump when I'm finished, but it still makes me happy that they have to see that eyesore every time they go into or out of their property. The non-profit has called another meeting for the 1st of February, so I may have an update by then, hopefully not. But you never know. I know this was a lot to read, but like I said, it's been going on for nearly 2 years now. Thankfully, it only took 3 parts to post the full story. My friend convinced me to write it all down and post here. Thank you for reading all of this, and it feels great to get it off my chest. And yeah, thank you very much for posting this interesting story. And Ripe Stars, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them OP in the comments either of the thread on r/Ripe Stories or under the comments of this video. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.